Hangman Adam Page is an anxious, depressed, alcoholic millennial cowboy, which is a string of adjectives I honestly never thought I'd have to say. God, I love pro wrestling. For as dumb as that all sounds, Page is surprisingly one of the most grounded characters in all of pro wrestling, and I think he's not only telling one of the most unique stories in the wrestling world, but he's telling one of the most unique stories in the world. My name is Heel Tracy, and this is why Hangman Page is telling the most important story in all of professional wrestling. So yeah, I know that title sounds a little pretentious, but give me a chance to explain myself. At the heart of wrestling has always been a story of black and white, good versus evil, heel versus face. Before we had access to weekly television, stories needed to be as accessible as possible. In the carnivals wrestling originated from, fans needed to know who to cheer and who to boo simply by looking at them. It's the same reason some wrestling moves are so exaggerated. There were no monitors, no cameras pointing at the faces, so they needed to convey to the people sitting in the back what was happening and how they should feel about it. In many ways, these limited beginnings have stuck through wrestling throughout the years. It's why we still have heels and faces today, and to be clear, I'm not knocking the formula. The idea that any character can turn good to bad at a moment's notice, essentially allowing them to reinvent themselves, can make you incredibly invested in the product. At WrestleMania 13, fans saw Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret the Hitman Hart pull off the fabled double turn, where both characters changed sides on the same night. And to this day, fans still talk about how powerful that moment is. In the case of The Big Show, he's turned 36 times throughout his career, which is more turns than actual years he's wrestled. The reason I bring all this up is not because it's a bad way to tell a story, but because it's not the only way to tell a story. AEW has been experimenting with the pro wrestling formula for some time now. The company has gone on record saying AEW programming won't include traditional babyfaces and heels. And yeah, I think MJF would like a word.
Because I'm better than you, and you know it!
Even a character like MJF was briefly able to build a relationship with the company's top face, Cody. And bluntly put, that just wouldn't be possible in the traditional world of wrestling. Enter Hangman Page, the anxious millennial cowboy. And if that character sounds stupid to you, just remember he shares a fictional universe with a deity that changes personalities on a whim, and a literal dinosaur. Wrestling is stupid, get over it. Simply put, Adam Page is a character who has let his failures define him more than his achievements. Before AEW's first show, he promised to be their first world champion. He very quickly earned that opportunity, and he would very quickly squander it. As many know, it would actually be Chris Jericho who would go on to beat both Kenny Omega and Hangman Page to become the first AEW champion. But Page got a ride out on a horse named Hunter Horse Helmsley, so that was pretty neat. Almost immediately after this loss, Hangman's character would start to go through some pretty noticeable changes. He began to distance himself from his friends in the Elite, and started to go on a journey of self-discovery, well, so to speak. Not long after this, he starts to find solid ground, both in his own eyes and the eyes of fans. Up to this point, Adam Page was often seen as a wrestler with potential, but never the guy fans came to see. That spot was always reserved for stars like Jon Moxley, Chris Jericho, and most importantly, the Young Bucks, two members of the Elite faction. It was only when Page distanced himself from the team that fans started to notice how charismatic he could actually be. His character started to be presented often near a bar or even drinking fans' beers post-match. Pre-COVID, of course. Trust me, it's not even the grossest thing he's done. Eventually, the wind started falling as well when Page found success in an unlikely tag partner, Kenny Omega. At this point, despite being one of the best wrestlers in the world, Omega had similar troubles finding success in AEW. Omega also held similar parallels to Page, being the only other wrestler to lose to Chris Jericho on his quest to becoming champion. Eventually, the two would go on to become the second ever tag team champions, and Adam Page would go on to celebrate in, well, Adam Page style.
2 shots of vodka.
To me, this is where Page's story really starts to become a little more clear. While Page seems to be increasingly portrayed as having a drink in his hands, it's important to note that at this point, he still seems to be drinking responsibly. Page is only drinking as a way to celebrate his newfound success, but never as a way to cope or avoid responsibility. Despite this, his former friends, the Young Bucks, begin to accuse him of having a drinking problem, and even start to feud with Page and Omega, trying to stake a claim to their tag titles. Eventually, Omega and Page would overcome the Young Bucks, but it's only after the match that we get a brief look into Page's self-destructive tendencies. For only a brief moment, we see a glint in Hangman's eyes, with clear intent to turn on his tag partner. But just as quickly as this moment arises, it passes. Page and the Young Bucks would eventually go on to repair their broken relationship. They would even go on to fight side by side against a common enemy, Chris Jericho. And if only for a brief moment, everything in Page's life seemed to find balance. He rejoined the Elite, strengthened his bond with Kenny Omega, and became easily one of the most dominant tag team champions to date. But this brief moment of peace would soon come crashing down. August 26th, on an episode of Dynamite, we would finally see Page's self-destructive habits take over. In a number one contender gauntlet match, featuring the Young Bucks and FTR, Page would go on to interject himself, costing the Young Bucks the match. I think it's this moment that speaks the loudest to me. In any other promotion, in any other time period, this would be seen as a heel turn. Page's character finally choosing evil over good, and changing his character to reflect that. But that's not what actually happened. Adam Page describes himself as an anxious person. And while in this story, this moment of weakness is explained as FTR manipulating him to make a decision he didn't want to make, it's clear that there's a lot more nuance to the story. As anyone who suffers from their own mental health can attest, in moments of confusion, it is so easy to succumb to your own anxieties and thoughts, and make decisions that you otherwise wouldn't even consider. Hell, even if you don't suffer from mental illness, I think a character making a decision that he will always regret is more relatable than a babyface making every right decision in the name of good could ever be. It's what makes this moment so powerful, and it's what makes the fallout of this moment hit so hard. Following weeks, he's confronted by the Young Bucks, but there's no super kicks or brawls, no heel promos or insults, just two people telling their former friend they're disappointed in him. The same thing happens when Omega and Page finally lose their titles to FTR. Kenny turning his back on Page as he helplessly falls to the floor is more powerful than any attack or heel turn ever could have been. It's not long after this that we start to see Page turn to alcohol, but now it's no longer a way to celebrate, but a coping mechanism. Despite this, Page would manage to win his way into a number one contender match for the world title, but in yet another career parallel, it would be against his former best friend and tag partner, Kenny Omega. In an interview a few nights before the match, Page would come, visibly drunk and stressed. He tries to put up this wall of confidence, but very, very briefly lets his guard down. And then we get this moment.
Yeah. I'm nervous, yeah. I'm nervous, right? I think everybody who walks through that tunnel gets nervous. They're too proud to admit it. Yeah, I'm nervous. The first day we started this company, I said I was going to be the first AEW champion, and I don't think anybody believed it but me. And they were right. And Saturday will be the closest I've gotten to a shot at that title since then. And if I don't win, I don't know what I got other than this glass of whiskey. So.
This moment is powerful. This moment encapsulates Hangman's entire personality, shortcomings and all, in just a few short sentences. I alluded to this before, but Adam Page is someone who defines himself almost entirely by his failures, while not being able to see his own achievements. In almost every other story, the face is being held down and forced to overcome whatever obstacles the heel places in front of him. But in this story, Page is not trying to overcome some larger-than-life heel. He's trying to overcome himself. And in many ways, that story is so relatable, it can not only make you feel seen, but exposed. Page would go on to lose that match, and like a self-fulfilling prophecy, he hasn't sniffed a title shot since. Nowadays, Page spends most of his time being recruited by other wrestlers and factions, and much like he did the Young Bucks, he distances himself, in fear of being hurt or hurting someone else. The irony being that all of these other wrestlers see everything good he has to offer, but Page can't see it in himself. But when Page does get the opportunity, when he does get that next title shot, when he does get the chance not only to prove to the world, but himself, how good he can really be, that will be more rewarding than any heel versus face story could ever be.